Hey everyone, I'm Jack, and I help regular people travel on any budget. In this video, I want to break down every single thing that someone should know before they start traveling. Basically, all the basics, everything that I wish I had known when I first started traveling. And I think a lot of these tips, if not all of these tips, are going to be super handy when you go on your first trip, or even if you've taken tons and tons. The first category I want to go over is where you're going to be staying. So I've made videos about this in the past, and I definitely recommend checking those out so you can see what all the different options are and what they cost. But a basic rundown of them is there's not only hotels and staying with family members. While both of those can be great options, there's also other things like Airbnb or couch surfing or hostels. All these different options that I had not even heard of before I started traveling on my own. In the past, I didn't do much traveling with my family. Before I was 20, we barely went anywhere. So I only knew about staying in a hotel or say staying with my grandparents or an aunt or uncle. So when I realized that there was other places that you could stay as well, which can end up being much cheaper, then it totally opened up a new world for me. So just looking into what the other types of places you could stay in are, seeing what they cost, and seeing if they'll work out for your style of travel is really a great idea. I'll link some resources down below, including some of my own videos where I talk about those different things, but knowing what the different options are, such as hostels and the other things I mentioned, is really going to change the way that you travel. However, I believe most people will still probably be staying in hotels, especially if you're traveling as a couple or with a family or even as friends, although with friends normally Airbnb I find is the best option. If a hotel is where you're going to be staying, then there is some other tips to know about them. First of all, it kind of helps when it comes to food. If you're going to be staying in a hotel, try and use the free breakfast if it has it. You are like paying for this because you're paying in the room, but if it is free or included in the room, then it's a great option, and make sure not to wake up too late and miss the breakfast, because that could save you a lot of money throughout the day. Because if you eat the free breakfast, you're not going to need to go buy something out on the street, and it may even fill you up enough to wait a little bit longer and save a lot of money on food. However, the opposite is also true. If there's nothing included, I would definitely say not to go to the hotel restaurants if possible. Often, compared to any local restaurant, they're going to be at least double the price. So avoiding the hotel restaurants, in my opinion, normally is a good idea. Although they could be delicious, I've been to some of them before, they do tend to be a little pricey, so I don't recommend going to them often. This also kind of applies to the restaurants around the hotels. Normally where hotels are located is going to be in a place where it's going to be other tourists. Normally they don't put hotels in the middle of regular residential areas, so be on the lookout for the fact that a lot of the restaurants around the hotels are also going to be pretty expensive. That's why I'd say, if possible, go outside the zone of where the hotel you're staying in is, because you'll save a lot of money being outside of the tourist zone. This doesn't always happen the same with other places such as Airbnb or with a hostel. Sometimes still with hostels, yes, but normally with an Airbnb, since it's normally someone's home, you're not going to have to worry as much about that, but just be on a lookout for what the prices are like around you, as you might not be paying the local price. The next category I want to talk about is the actual transport, how you're going to get to the destination you're going to. If you're going to be flying, it's definitely worth to check out many different places to buy the tickets, not just one, like Kiwi or Skyscanner or Google Flights. Use a combination of them. Look on the airline websites. Looking around is really going to help you to find the cheapest flights and not only looking at one single place. I do, of course, have other videos as well, all about how to book cheap flights, which I'll link down below as well. But just looking around and also booking early. Like, you may think that you're going to get a deal by being closer because there might be something left, but most of the time, in my experience, it always ends up being way more expensive if you wait till last minute. So try and book ahead if possible. Another one of the biggest mistakes that would have saved me so much money if I had realized before is taking a look at when you're going to arrive at the country, because of how you're going to get away from the airport once you get there. So for example, I normally fly really cheap flights, like less than $200, less than $150, but most of them end up being at really late at night. So you arrive in the other country around maybe 6 or something, really early in the morning. However, something you might run into is that there's not a lot of options to leave the airport at those hours. So for example, when I arrived to Paris, I was gonna take an Uber to my friend's house, but he lived a little far away, and I ended up paying just as much for the Uber as I did for the Ryanair flight. So realistically, I probably could have even gone a little nicer on an airplane, like spent a little bit more, got there a bit earlier, would have been way easier. So definitely keep that in mind, is depending on when you arrive there, you're either going to have to wait if you don't want to pay as much, or you're going to have to shell out a lot to take like an Uber or a taxi, because most of the time there's not going to be any trains or any public transportation running at those hours. Another simple tip when it comes to transportation that depends on the place or city you're going to is try and walk if possible. If you are capable of walking places that are around 30 minutes or less, or as long as it's a safe place to do so, then I definitely recommend taking the walk instead. First of all, it's going to save you money because you're not going to have to worry about paying for transport. But also, I found a lot of hidden local gems just by walking in between my destinations. In Tokyo, I would sometimes use the metro, but I really tried to walk as much as possible just so I could see if there might be a small restaurant or a cool shop along the way. And you're getting some exercise in, you're going to feel really good. And I think overall, it's the best option to take when you're traveling if it's possible in the place you're going. The next category I want to go over is money, because money plays a big part in saving money and in budgeting. So the first thing you should really be paying attention to is the exchange rate of the country you're going to. Say you're going to Mexico and you want to get some pesos, and a peso is, say, around 18 to 20 pesos per dollar right now. So if you don't know that, you're going to be looking at something and be like, oh, okay, this is 300 pesos. Is that a lot? Is that a little? You won't really know, and it could be hard to judge what you're actually spending on the places that you're spending. Personally, that's why I love the app XE, which I'll link down in the description as well. It's a really nice free app where you could just put in what currencies you want to see. You put in whatever value in any of those currencies, and it automatically converts it to all the other ones. I use this a lot while I was traveling around Europe, as there was the euros, and then when there was pounds in the UK, and then some other European countries like Poland had their own currencies. So having an app where I could see all of what the conversions were back to USD made it super easy, and it's a great thing to have in mind, so you really get a better idea of what you're spending, and you don't have to wait till you go back to your own country to see on your bank statements how much did I actually spend. That also leads me into the fact that if possible, you shouldn't really be taking out cash at the airports or any of the conversion places, because they're going to charge you some fees, and also the conversion rate generally isn't that good. If possible, I would recommend using your local bank account to take out money in a local ATM in that country. So I have the Charles Schwab card, which refunds me for ATM fees, and it also doesn't have any foreign transaction fees. But even if your card doesn't have that, most of the time the small fees on the ATM, which are going to be lower in the local banks as well, is a better option, and you'll still be saving money compared to what the conversion rates are at the airport or any other conversion places. Because every time I've done that, I've lost at least $20 to $30 on the conversion. So really avoid those places if possible, unless you really need to. However, you could always check with your bank before you leave your country to see if they'll do a conversion to that currency back at home. A lot of the time this does take some time, so you need to do it a bit in advance, but you could go out to your local bank and be like, hey, I'm going to be traveling to the UK. Can I do an exchange for pounds here? And they may have to order it for you, but a lot of the time you'll get a much better rate. That also leads me into the fact that if you are using your local cards, make sure always to deny using your own currency in that country. So say you're at a restaurant, this happens a lot of the times when I would go to Mexico, you'll have like the reader and it'll say like, do you want to pay in pesos or in dollars? Definitely always pick the local currency, because you'll get often through the system a worse conversion rate than if you just let your bank do the conversion. Whenever you let your bank do the conversion, it's almost always the best rate possible you could get, like really close to what the actual conversion is. But if you take the conversion through the system, most of the time you kind of get screwed over a little bit. They'll definitely take some like extra, change it a bit. So it's not worth it. Just always try and take the local currency. The last part about money is look into some no foreign transaction fee cards, whether that be a debit card or even more. I recommend getting a travel credit card if possible, so that you can start building up some points and use that for even more travel. I'll put some links down in the description to ones that I've used before, and also some different lists, so you can take a look for yourself which one might work best in your scenario. Some smaller categories that I want to go over quickly are, say, your phone. First of all, I definitely think you should be getting an eSIM through an app like Airlo or Scratch. I've talked about these in the past. I really love them. They don't sponsor me, but I always use them while I'm traveling. If you're not going to do that, if you're only going for a few days, then definitely let your carrier know and try and see what the fees are or the cost for international data, because you want to be careful not to rack up. Some of them could cost like $10 a day or even more, so just at least be aware of what you're going to be paying there. Next is also travel insurance. Most of the time, I don't get travel insurance because, first of all, the insurance I have currently covers me for some expenses abroad. Also, my credit cards also cover a lot of those insurances. If you don't have either of these options, which I really encourage you to look into, then it could be worth it. But most of the time, I find that it's a better idea to see if you can get a credit card or something that could cover it rather than having to buy it. If it's your final resort, it may be a good option because if something does go wrong, you're going to end up spending a lot more than if you don't buy this. Of course, it adds some cost in the beginning, so it's not the best for saving money right away, but in the long term, it could definitely save you more money. Lastly, it's also just to do a little bit of research about the place you're going. Is there a peak season? Is there a time you could go when there's not as many tourists? Things are going to be a bit cheaper. Also, is there a time that's holidays, so a lot of things are going to be closed? Just make sure you know what it's going to be like at the time you're going to that country or destination, because you may want to rethink the time you're going based on those different factors. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, I would love if you could leave it a like or even get subscribed if you want to learn more about travel. I also have a free community which is linked down in the description. I would love to see you there to talk more about travel. You could learn directly from me and the rest of the community. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.